Hi there, it's Ms. Novikowski coming to you from the studio at Grower Elementary in the Richmond School District. The Math Studio project I'm going to share with you today is a macrame jar hanger. So this is just one example of how it could look depending on the rope or string or yarn that you use. It uses measuring, and then we're going to just do some really simple knotting to hold a jar in place. And that jar can be from your recycling. This was a jam jar. Another jar I have here was from some honey that I washed out. And once you've made this hanger, you could put a succulent plant in it or another type of plant, or a little candle or a little light that uses a battery, and you can hang it indoors or outdoors. So the first step of this project is to measure out 4 lengths of yarn or rope at 2 meters each. So I had a measuring tape here and it's in centimeters, so 100 centimeters is 1 meter. So I measured out 1 meter and then I doubled that to get 2 meters. So you need 4 lengths of rope or yarn that are 2 meters each. Okay? And then I'm going to fold that in half. So I'm trying to keep all 4 of my ropes here. See, I'm trying to keep them at the same length. And then this will be halfway up here. So there we go. This will be the top, and this is what we're going to hang things on. So the first step is to make a big overhand knot using all of these pieces here. So I like to go like this, pull this down, and then make a loop here. So I see what I've done. I've crossed that in front, and then I pull all those 8 pieces of rope through here. Remember, it's 4 pieces, but it's folded in half, so it's doubled. Pull that through, and I pull that tight up here. So this is where I'll hang it from, maybe in my tree or in my home on a hook. And I just pull all the strings underneath the knot to pull it nice and tight. So that's the first step of the hanging macrame jar project. So to work on this next part, sometimes I use, it's called an S hook, and I'll put it through the top here and hang it on my weaving loom or on a door handle or hook or something to hang this. But I'm going to do this flat here just so that you can see this, the different steps. So what I do now is I separate these out, 2 ropes in each section here. There we go. So I'm going to tie a knot in each of these 2 ropes. So we're not doing any of the square knots or macrame knots that we've done in previous projects. These are all overhand knots, just like we did for this one. So I'm going to go down, though, about 30 centimeters or so, and this is going to be the big hanging part. So about the length of a ruler, and then that's where I know where to move that up there so you can see. About the length of a ruler. And then again, I'm going to do the overhand knot. So pull this down, cross this over, and then pull those 2 through. And then pull that tight. Okay. And I want to do the other 3 knots at about that same length. I'll try and keep them as even as possible. So you could measure it out if you want. But I like to just do it and then estimate and then adjust them if I need to. So those 2 are pretty close. If they're a little bit off, that's okay, but I can move that one down a little bit like that. Okay. So there I've got 2 knots side by side, and now I'm going to work on this one here. Loop it and then pull the other 2 strings through, and then pull that tight. I'm going to see how, see that one is quite a bit lower than those 2, so I can just loosen this up a little bit and move it up on the strings. And then try pulling that again. There, so that's lined up more with those 2, and then my last one. Pull those through, see that they're lined up. How are we doing there? Yeah, so there we go, our 4 knots. So that's the first part of the hanger. So again, just using that basic overhand knot again, but this uses a bit of a macrame technique. So instead of just tying again here, because that's not really creating anything to hold the jar, I'm going to take one rope from this pair and one rope from the next to it pair, and I'm going to tie a knot with those two. Okay? Same overhand knot, and about, let's see, that's about 5 centimeters apart. And this is like creating a netting. It's like what they catch fish with. And this is what will hold the jar. Okay? So there's one knot in between these two, and now I take one rope from here and one rope from the next pair, and I make another knot in between. And trying to keep them as close to even as you can. Okay? And then this one rope from this pair and the pair next to it, and do an overhand knot, do a loop and pull it through, adjust it so it's even with the other ones. There we go. Now I have one left on this right side and one left on this left side. And I'm going to tie those two together. And you can see this starts to bring it around, and that's what's going to form the little pocket to hold the jar. Push that up, make sure it's in line with those other knots. There you can see how those are coming together. Now we've got one row, two rows. Now we're going to do the third row. For the third row of knots, so we've got our first row here, and then we came in between the middle, then we take one from each side again and do the same thing for the third row. An overhand knot here. Push it up so it's tight, pull it, there. And then I'm going to just carefully roll this over and take the next two to bring them together again. This is where it's a little bit harder when you're laying it down flat to sort of see which ones go together. And so sometimes I'll hold it up like this to see, okay, yeah, now these two are the next two I'm going to tie. There we go, and there should be one more pair. Again, I can just hold it up to sort of check. There we go, that's the last two pairs of ropes, two parts of a pair. Turn this through and pull it tight. There, we've got our 3 rows, 1, 2, 3 of knots. The next part of this project is to check how your jar fits. Now you have to be careful with a glass jar. You might be using plastic. You don't have to worry so much, but we don't want it to fall through. So I'm going to hold my hands here at the bottom under the 3 rows of knots as I put the jar in. So I'm going to put the jar in at the top, turning it upside down just to make it a little easier to get into place here. The knots will go around it. I'm going to pull up there. The top row of knots should be near the top of the jar. So when I turn it over like this, I need to stretch those knots up a little bit more. This is great if you have someone else to help you with this. So you can see there's the top row of knots, and then you see all the different rows there. And then what I'm going to do at the bottom is I'm going to tie it in another knot just like I did at the top, an overhand knot. So where I've got my hands here holding those ropes together, I'm going to tie an overhand knot. So over, there's a lot of ropes to pull through here. Make sure you pull them all through, all 8. And then pull that up, and that's going to hold your jar in place. So put that under there, and then I'm going to pull all these bottom ropes tight so that knot gets nice and tight and secure. There, pull those all in. So there's my jar, held really securely in by all the knots and the big knot at the bottom there. And again, I could put a plant in here, or a little candle, or a little battery light. And this could go indoors or outdoors. If you want to add some extra details to the bottom, you could. You could do some macrame knots. You could braid some pieces together. I like to just tie a few knots in some of these ropes that are hanging down, just for an extra detail, and then you could fray some of them. Kind of separate those apart a little bit. Let's see, how many do I have here? Maybe I'll do one more knot. So half knots, half knot knots. And then unravel some of this so it makes a bit of a fringe at the bottom, but you can do whatever you like to those bottom ropes to add some little interest.